You walk into the kitchen at 11 p.m. and your old dog is standing in the corner, not drinking, not eating, not waiting for anything you can see, just staring at the wall. When you say their name, they turn around slowly, like someone who's been pulled out of a long thought. And for just a second, before they recognize you, there's a flicker in their eyes that wasn't there last year. You've probably told yourself they were just being weird or tired, or that something was off in the lighting. It's none of those. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you already know that. You've noticed it more than once now. The pauses at doorways, the blank moments, the way they look at the corner of a room a little longer than they used to. You've Googled it at midnight. You've half asked your vet about it without really asking. You've quietly told yourself it's nothing because the alternative is too hard to think about. I'm going to tell you what's actually happening. In the next 8 minutes, you're going to find out exactly what your dog is seeing when they stare at that wall. And it's not what most people are afraid of. You're going to learn the one position your dog stares from that tells you if this is something gentle or something serious. And by the end, you'll know the single question to bring to your vet that will change the entire conversation. Stay with me until the end. There's one piece almost no veterinarian brings up unless you specifically ask. Here's what we know, and it's new. In December 2025, an international working group of veterinary neurologists led by Dr. Natasha Olby at NC State published the first standardized diagnostic guidelines in the entire history of veterinary medicine for what's happening inside your old dog's head when they do this. The paper sat in the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association for almost 5 months before most owners had even heard of it. Most general practice vets are still catching up to it. The findings are remarkable, and they explain almost everything you've been quietly worried about. 1. What's actually happening inside their head? Let's start with what your dog is doing, biologically. By around 8 or 9 years old, earlier in larger breeds, later in smaller ones, most dogs begin a process so quiet that almost no owner catches it starting. Inside their brain, microscopic deposits of a protein called beta amyloid begin forming between the neurons. The same protein, by the way, that's involved in Alzheimer's disease in humans. These deposits don't erase anything. What they do is stranger. They slow down the signals that travel between different parts of the brain. Now here's where it gets specific. The part of your dog's brain that processes vision, the occipital cortex, is one of the first places this slowing happens. So when your dog looks at a wall, their eyes are still working. The image is reaching the brain. But the next step, the one that turns shape and shadow into "this is a wall I've walked past 1,000 times," that step is taking a beat longer than it used to. To your dog, in that moment, the wall isn't a wall. It's a pattern they're trying to identify. And the longer they stand there, the harder their brain is working to figure out what they're seeing. That's not your dog spacing out. That's your dog thinking, slowly, over something that used to be automatic. 2. Why staring is the first sign, not a late one. Here's what the new 2026 guidelines made official, and it surprised even some experienced vets. Staring isn't a late symptom. It's almost always the first one. The Olby Working Group identified 6 core behaviors that show up in dogs with cognitive decline. They organized them under a 6-letter mnemonic, DISHAA. D is for disorientation. Staring at walls falls here. I is for changes in interaction with the family. S is for sleep-wake disruption, the 3 a.m. pacing. H is for house soiling in places they'd never use. A is for activity changes, less play, less tail. And the second A is for anxiety. the new guideline added that one this year. In the studies tracking hundreds of senior dogs, the disorientation cluster, and specifically staring, was the behavior that showed up before any of the others in nearly 2/3 of cases. Before the pacing, before the accidents, before the personality shifts. Which means the wall your dog is staring at right now is statistically the earliest signal you're going to get. That's also the reason owners miss it. It looks like nothing. It feels like nothing. It's not destructive. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's just a quiet old dog in a corner. But it's the door opening on the rest of the diagnosis. And hey, quick thing. If any of this is hitting close to home, do me a favor and tap the like. It helps YouTube push this to other people who are quietly going through the same thing tonight. That's the whole point of this channel. Let's keep going. 3. The 3 stages, and the position that tells you which one. Here's the part of the new guidelines that almost no owner has heard yet. The 2026 Working Group, for the first time, broke canine cognitive decline into 3 official stages: mild, moderate, severe. Each one has its own behavioral signature, and the position your dog stares from is one of the strongest tells about which stage they're in. In mild decline, your dog stares, but they snap out of it quickly. You say their name, and they turn. Maybe a beat slower than they used to, but they come back. The staring is brief, usually a few seconds, and they can still find their way out of the room they walked into. In moderate decline, something different happens. They start staring from awkward positions, standing on the hinge side of a door instead of the side that opens, stuck in a corner, head pressed gently to the wall. They don't snap out as easily. You might have to walk over and physically guide them. In severe decline, they stop turning entirely when you call their name. The stare lasts minutes, not seconds. And here's the heartbreaking signature the researchers documented. They often stop looking at anything specific. They just face into a space and stand still, like the room itself has stopped making sense. That's the staircase the new guidelines describe. 3 stages, years apart usually, and the position your dog stares from, open side of the door, hinge side, or no orientation at all, is one of the cleanest at-home reads on where they are. 4. The behaviors most owners are misreading right now. Most owners don't realize how many behaviors in their old dog are actually the same behavior as the staring, just translated into different small acts. When your old dog stops at a doorway and just pauses, that's not them forgetting. That's the same beat their brain takes at the wall, applied to a doorway. When they sit and watch the corner of the kitchen for a long time, not your hands, not the food bowl, just the corner. That's the same processing delay, applied to a familiar object. When they stare at you longer than they used to, quieter than they used to, that one is harder, because part of it is them re-anchoring on a face their brain has the clearest map of. But part of it, sometimes, is the same neurological pause, the second their brain takes to confirm, yes, this is the person I know. You haven't been imagining the change. The behaviors are connected. They just weren't shaped like a single picture until now. 5. What you can do, starting tonight. Here's what the research actually says works. Don't startle them out of a stare. Walk into their line of sight slowly. The disorientation gets worse when they're pulled out of a thought sharply. Light their space at night. The 2025 NC State recommendations are clear on this. Soft, low, ambient light in hallways, and the room where they sleep reduces both the staring and the night pacing in roughly 2/3 of dogs with mild to moderate decline. Talk to them more. The auditory part of a dog's brain holds up much longer than the visual one. They can hear you when their eyes are still figuring out the room. And this one, if you've noticed 2 or more of those Disha signs in the last few months, write them down. Bring the list to your vet. The new 2026 guidelines created 2 new diagnostic levels and 3 official severity stages. Most general practice vets are still catching up to them. A written list of behaviors changes the conversation completely. It moves you from "my dog is acting weird" to "my dog has these specific signs in this specific order." And that's the difference between leaving the office with reassurance and leaving with a real plan. Early intervention with omega-3s, antioxidants, and in some cases a medication called selegiline has been shown to slow cognitive decline by months, sometimes years. Months matter. When you're counting in dog years, every month is a long time. 6. What they're actually seeing. Now I want to come back to the hardest, most asked question, the one almost every owner thinks but doesn't want to say out loud. What is my dog actually seeing right now? Here's the most honest answer the science can give us. When your old dog stares at a wall, they're almost certainly not seeing ghosts. They're not seeing pests. They're not seeing anything that isn't there. What they're doing, and this is the part the researchers describe almost gently in the new paper, is what neurologists call retrieval. Their brain is reaching for the memory of the room, the wall, the corner, the rug. The memory is still there. It's not gone. It's just slightly out of reach. So they hold still, the way you'd hold still trying to remember a name on the tip of your tongue. Sometimes it comes back. Sometimes it doesn't. And then they shake their head once, walk forward, and the moment passes. That's what's happening when your old dog stares at the wall. They're not lost. They're not gone. They're remembering. Slowly. The room they've lived in for 10 years. 7. When staring becomes urgent. I told you, at the beginning there was one piece most vets won't bring up unless you ask. Here it is. Staring becomes urgent, clinically urgent, in 3 specific situations. The 2026 guidelines flag all 3. The first, if your dog stares and presses their head against the wall, not a casual lean, actual pressure, standing with their forehead pushed into the wall, sometimes for minutes. That's called head pressing, and it's not cognitive decline. It's a sign of something happening in the brain that needs imaging within days, not weeks. The second, if the staring comes with sudden new circling, tight, repeated circles in one direction, that combination is a different signal entirely. And the third, if your dog stares and you can't get their attention back at all, not by their name, not by a treat, not by touch. A dog who can't be reclaimed from a stare for several minutes is a dog who needs a vet that day. These aren't common. The vast majority of senior dogs staring at walls are showing the gentle, slow, beta-amyloid version we talked about. But you should know the difference. Most owners don't, and most vets don't bring it up unless you ask. Now you know, go back to the beginning of this video, to the moment I described, your old dog at 11 p.m. standing in a corner, staring at a wall. Now you know. It wasn't ghosts, it wasn't fear, it wasn't them losing their mind in the way you've been quietly afraid of. It was a pattern on a wall, in a room they have loved for years, being slowly retrieved by a brain that's a little tired tonight. Your old dog isn't staring at nothing, they're remembering. And the wall is just where the memory happens to live. Tonight, when you find them in that corner again, walk in slowly. Say their name. Wait the extra beat. They're still in there. They were always in there.